Hello, fellow travelers. Welcome to Fate's Wide Wheel. I'm your host, Sam Fain, and I am thrilled to be joined this week by Georgina Riley, who plays Janice Calavicci on the Quantum Leap revival. This is so cool to have you back, Georgina. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you got to have me right before I knew the secret. You didn't know? Did you know the secret that I
I
was coming?
didn't know. In the interest of full disclosure, at the time we spoke, I had no idea. I
Mm,
found out, I think, the day after we spoke, to
yeah,
which I was like, oh, okay.
I
But
wouldn't
I,
have been able to change anything about our interview anyway, so
right.
it's fine that it was after the fact. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I
yeah.
completely agree. I completely agree. But I did, and it's funny because I had mentioned this to someone else at one point, who also works at the show, that you posted a couple of photos on Instagram, and when you did, immediately, like, I went into kind of investigative mode because they were actually from like a parking garage elevator that's like right next door to like the studio or something, and I,
Oh no,
yeah,
I was
and I
like,
was
no,
like,
this together. But then we got these
right.
ice cream sundaes, and then someone else post their giant. We got these ice cream things from one of the Universal places, these giant, ridiculous desserts. And then I was like, I can post this, right? But then if someone else, I mean, if you're a detective about it,
Right, right. Yeah, it was one of those things where I think luckily there's not too many of us out there. So so yeah, I didn't say anything to anyone because I felt like at that point I knew, and because I already knew ahead of that, I felt like it wouldn't have been right for me to be like, "Oh, hey, did you see this?" because I
you're
knew,
looking.
and it wouldn't have been just pure detective work necessarily. Um
Yes,
but yeah, but I mean,
yeah.
it was so exciting. I had such a great time talking to you last time, and we were just talking briefly before we started about theater, and you had said something about wanting to do some theater yourself. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I was just so, I mean, it was really fun listening to you talking about the different plays you've done. And I guess the thing about theater that is, I mean, I feel like when you start acting and you take acting classes, a lot of your work that you do is theater pieces. And I think it's
Yeah.
so important because you only have the stage and the sets. We can't cut to something. You have to tell the whole story through these characters, and the depth that the characters get to go into, it tends to be deeper. Obviously you see that in some film that are like plays, but I think that there's just something that you get to really exercise as an actor that you don't get to do in film. And you do all the rehearsal, which is like all your takes, and you're figuring it out, and then it has to be somewhat, you can't throw everybody off every night. Obviously it's new, but there's a precision to it, and there's just a depth to it, and some of the stories that you get to tell. And I think, yeah, I actually have been thinking a lot about doing a play and figuring out how I could do that, just to fill up my cup in that kind of way as an actor.
Yeah, I absolutely. I love that because I mean I completely agree. For me, I mean my film television experience is extremely limited, right? Like I've done like, a couple of indie films, and I've done a couple of like web pilots or whatever here or there. But the thing is, like you say, I mean you get to live in that moment, which is great, and it can be very like thrilling and energizing, and you get to the opportunity to kind of like just come in and just let it happen, which can be super exciting. But with
Mhm.
theater, you really do, yeah, you live with it, and you live that arc, during the course of those 90 minutes to 2 3, or if you're doing Hamlet, 4 hours. You live that during that evening, which is also such a thrill, and it does allow you to sometimes go a little bit deeper. It's funny because sometimes I've theorized that even though the act of making each individual episode of television is not that at all, the idea that over the course of like a couple of seasons or something like that, especially if you're like number one on a call sheet, the opportunity to live out that arc, I think about like I used to think about The Sopranos this way a lot. For James Gandolfini to have been able to like live out that Tony Soprano arc over the course of those 7 years, like
And
that's, I
sometimes
mean,
you don't know what's coming, right? So
right.
sometimes I mean, if you do a mini series, I just finished One Day. I had never
Mm,
seen the movie. Have you
hmm.
seen the movie One
I
Day?
have seen the movie. Yeah, yeah, I've
So I
read the book
didn't know
too.
what was, so I didn't know it was coming. I just was like, people are talking about this. It looks like my kind of thing. And Anyways, obviously, if you get a mini series where you've gotten like all the scripts, I think you can do more like that arcing. Obviously, series to series, you kind of, the thing that's cool about film and TV is you have to just be there. Like sometimes you get a rewrite and you're like, oh,
Mm,
okay, I got to be here and I got to do what is here. And you trust your team and you understand your character. And I think, there's a skill to that and there's a joy to that, the same way there's a joy to, I think with theater, I love how close it is to, art is like just creation. And each time you say a line, you'll never say it the same way. We've talked about this before. You'll never say it the same way. Even if it sounds the same, it's not. It's different. Your face isn't exactly the same every time.
yeah.
And it's gone. And unless it's recorded like it is in film and TV, that moment has gone. And I think there's something so freeing about that. Whereas in film and TV, it's tracked, like it's recorded and then it's modified and it's changed, and by the time you actually see it, it's not the way it felt when you did it, because obviously there's editing and then there's color correction and maybe they shot it from a different, the angle they shot it from is not the angle you're experiencing it from. And so theater is just this, like, I don't know, it's just like a freeing thing of like, I get to go out there tonight and like it's very scary in another way because you have to know what you're doing
Right.
and be, I know there's something thrilling and your audience is right there. And I do miss, getting to talk to you is so wonderful because, you know, you shoot something and sometimes it doesn't even come out for so long and you don't
Right.
watch your audience experience it. You're not there being like, oh, did that hit? Did that not? Like there's a delay, which theater doesn't have. You can feel the room in theater. So you can kind of go like, ooh, I think this audience tonight needs a bit more of this, or I
Hmm.
need to that, or you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
there's,
It can really dictate the pace sometimes of a show, dependent on like the audience response. If they're super engaged
yeah,
and they're laughing at everything, or doing that or audibly
yeah,
reacting, it does change the pace sometimes. And on other occasions, like if they're a little bit more silent, then obviously you get to really drive. But the fascinating thing to me about doing that is that like you're still, obviously you have this fidelity to the story and you have the fidelity to what you've created in rehearsals, but there's always opportunity to explore even once you get on stage. And sometimes, one of my favorite things is experiencing those different audiences and finding that the audience that might laugh, at every joke and everything lands, it's great, that's consistent, it's lovely. But then there's that audience that's kind of silent and reserved, and then they get to that point where like that one joke lands and it's just this huge, because they're getting to let it out. And
yeah,
I love that aspect of it. And it's funny because this past weekend with the new show that we just opened, like we experienced that over the course of 2 nights. Like with the opening night, the audience was a little bit quieter, but when they did laugh, they really laughed. And then on the second night, it was like it was consistent, but you kind of almost, you get used to it after a while, and it alters that pace, which just sometimes alters the meaning behind things. You find yourself discovering little things in those moments between laughs or whatever that you might not have necessarily discovered if you were just kind of driving through. So I mean, I love it. I could talk about it all day. Uh, but
yeah,
here's, oh, go ahead.
yes. No, no, no. I was saying, yeah, it's wonderful. It's just a thrilling experience. And it's like you're hosting a party. They're your dinner guests,
Mm,
right? And you have to judge, like, not all your guests are the same. It's like, and you've never met them before. It's like you're having new strangers over and you're like, okay, like, here's my story to you, or here's my communication. And you're feeling out, like, oh, yeah, like, I think they need more emphasis on this, or they're not quite there. Like it's amazing how you can feel the people, like even though
yeah.
they're not talking, you just feel it. And it's such a cool, yeah, it's such a cool experience.
Yeah. Yeah. It's obviously, it's been my favorite thing in the world for the past nearly 30 years. So, uh, I'm lucky to keep getting the chance to do it, on some level. One of the things that always fascinates me about film and television is that, like you said, once, it's kind of handed off, once you kind of leave the set, there's so many things that happen to it after that. And one of the things that
Mhm.
I'm always interested in, especially from an actor's perspective, is ADR, because I feel like in some ways, because I've talked to some actors where it's like, oh, I hate it, and I've talked to other actors like, it's fine, it's just something that you do, and because it feels so separate from what was happening on the day you were actually
Mhm.
like filming those scenes. Can you talk a little bit about your experiences with it and what your feelings are on having to kind of go back and re-record dialogue after the fact?
Yeah, I'm guessing everyone knows what ADR is who'd be watching, which is just
I
where we
think
go if like yeah, if there's wind or there's some problem or the line didn't get picked up, we have to go in a studio later and just do it again. It really depends on the scene for me. I have done ADR where I fought to not do it. Like
mm,
there would be an intimate scene and I would have whispered or there was something, just more nuanced about it. And I was like, I would always ask like, why are we, this sounds good to me. Why are we correcting it? And it's like, oh, well, you just got so quiet there. And I was like, that's a performance choice. And I sometimes will say no. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it because I don't think there's anything technically. I always speak to the technician. I'm like, what do you think? Like, is this actually an issue for the edit? And I'll always have a conversation. Obviously, it's a game to me. Like, there's different ways of doing it, right? Because you have a screen and they have the boop boop boop, and then you time out your line, or they have these white bars that close to show you
mm,
when to speak. I'm not a go on I'm a parroter. So I prefer to hear it, me say it, and then I will say it. I'll copy it I'm really good at copying. So I'll just like copy it 3 times
yeah,
in the way it sounds. I can't do it at the same time while hearing it. Like it's funny how there's just different actors are different in how they do their ADR. I don't mind it. It really just depends how much it shifts my performance.
mhm.
And Mark and I, my husband and I are so funny because we'll be like ADR, like we'll know, right? You'll hear the
Yes.
sound can't quite, you're like ADR, like you can kind of hear it. It's such a silly thing that we notice. I also sometimes look for marks on the ground, and sometimes when there's a
Oh,
Y, I'm immediately like, are there any marks? Did anyone leave any marks on the floor? I don't know why. It's such a silly,
yeah.
I've spotted a couple here and there, but yeah, I'm in between, but I will hold integrity to the performance is my most important thing. So if there's nothing wrong really technically with it and they're just worried that it's just not quite, I'm like, nah, I think that's more important than changing it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was my choice. That was what that moment dictated. I completely understand that. It's funny because I tend to have a similar thing where I will sometimes I'll catch it and I'll just be like, oh, that was ADR. But the fascinating thing is that in getting the screeners for the revival series, sometimes they're not completed when I get them. So it's
And it's so
really obvious. It's like, oh yeah, that's not even them. That's just somebody that, did the temp, and that's what I'm hearing right now, which is
Isn't that incredible that sound contributes, like everybody contributes to like the whole end product? Like,
yeah,
because when sound is not quite right, it's like throws off the whole thing. Like you would never think of it that way. But when I've watched things that are temp, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so jarring. Like it's not
yeah.
quite right. And it just makes you appreciate the whole group aspect of making something.
Absolutely. And I feel so fortunate with the conversations that I've gotten to have due to the Quantum Leap Revival with so many different people, whether it's, obviously actors, directors, editors, writers. It's really given me, even more appreciation for the jobs that everyone has and how important it is, because you have to have it. I mean, and that's one of the things I've always loved about performing arts in general. I mean, I think it's true for theater, it's true for film and television, is that there's, a collaborative effort that has to take place in order for it to be something remarkable. Because if there's any one element that's kind of missing or a little bit less than the others, it can drag the whole down, and everybody has to kind of rise up to that level. So getting the opportunity to to speak to people that are doing those things, or have some sort of direct line to the people working on sound or whatnot, it's always fascinating to me. And it's just as true. I spoke with Daniel James Chan recently, who's the composer for the series, and just thinking about what would something sound like without the music, without the score. And I think that Against Time is such a beautiful example of that, because I know for me, and certainly for a lot of like old school fans of the show, like I think one of everybody's favorite moments from Against Time is the moment when Janice tells the group about where she came from, and that original piece of music is playing from the classic series at that time. And that music, it's just so it transports you, and it touches you, because it just connects to all of that other stuff that people are familiar with. So that's
Oh yeah.
my attempt at segueing into talking about Against Time, because I would love to, we it's funny, we touched on some of this stuff already in our last conversation, which I felt like was just kind of a little organic due to the nature of the character. But when you did find out that you were coming back, did you get to read the script like right away, or was that something that came later?
No, Drew and I are friends on Instagram, and we message back and forth like casually. And he had like, I think one time he was like, I was like, I say, oh, congratulations on that episode. It was so great. And he was like, oh, thanks. He's like, yeah, I'm writing the finale. And he put a winky emoji. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, I didn't think anything about the winky emoji at the time. I was just like, cool. And then I don't know, a few days went by and I was like, winky emoji. It's kind of like, oh, I think that it was so funny. It was a random thought I had one day. I was like, I think the winky emoji means something. You know what I mean? It was very funny. And then I didn't see a script right away because these things, they're shooting. I mean, I think we shot that and it aired like so fast,
Yeah.
So I didn't see a script right away, but I did get like I was like, what can I know? Like what's happening, And so it was cute. It was just really, it was fun to come back. It was fun to, I mean, obviously being the smartest person is a nice in a room is a nice thing, or one of, I guess. And to come back and save the day, and yeah, to tell that story. And it was so funny because you and I had talked about that in our interview about where Janice came from, and I
Yeah.
did not know the script at that point.
Yeah.
And I said that to Drew. I was like, that's so bizarre that I had already spoken about that, because that's
Yeah.
one of my favorite scenes of Dean Stockwell. When he asks Sam to do it,
Yeah.
that scene and that exchange is just such beautiful work. And I had watched that a bunch of times. I was like, oh, this is so good. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked a little bit about this, but I feel like maybe this is a more direct question than I was able to ask last time, just because I didn't know, I didn't have the information. But when you're watching something like that or seeing something like that and thinking of it in terms of the character, is I would imagine it makes it a lot easier to connect that to, that's Janice's dad, like that's dad for Janice, and seeing and
Mhm.
having that person. And how does something like that work on you as an actor?
Well, that was how I kind of, when people are like, oh, are you going to be like, when I got the part, I was like, am I like Al? Like, how am I going to, because I also didn't know the tone of the show yet. I didn't know anything. It would only just started. So
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know what I'm coming into. So I watched Dean. I watched a lot of his work, and I watched um Beth, because I was like, okay, well, these are my parents. So this is who raised me and what qualities and things have I learned. And also, I'm also my own person. That's very true of kids. They're their own thing, and they're obviously they pick up things from you, but so I kind of just pulled from all those ideas that I had. And I think the playfulness of Dean is something that Janice has, but Janice has a bit more of a chip on her shoulder because her mom doesn't agree or is torn about the whole situation and what it did to dad. So there's not this freedom the same way, or the joy of it that Al had. You know what I mean? Like there's all
Yeah.
those, it's a trickle down. So that was kind of how I created her. And then I also just read what was there and kind of, I feel like there's thinking about and there's research for acting, and then there's just your instantaneous feeling, because when we watch a TV show or we read a book, we don't read a sentence and then think about how we feel about it. It's an instant, you know what I mean? It's an
Yeah.
instant, you have these intuitive moments from the book or from a script, and I think you just have to really trust those and go with them, as well as what makes sense within understanding the story and the genre and what you're doing.
Right.
And so, you marry. those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it absolutely does. Because I mean, I would imagine, and please feel free to elaborate on this, but I would imagine that it's definitely like that case of like saying like I can, I can grab this and this and this and this and this and kind of put it in my toolbox, and then I'm going to
Mhm.
get the script and I'm going to see what the other actors are doing and how everything's going, and maybe this won't be useful to me because it doesn't fit with what's happening, in the story that these writers are telling and the stories that we're collaborating on now. But I can, I can always maybe save something like that for later, or could be the opposite is true, is it's like, oh yes, this absolutely helps to ground me and connect me to this piece of the story, because yes, I can absolutely use what I saw, in an episode of Quantum Leap from 30 years ago to help to connect, to this in some way. And I would imagine also that having Susan on set, like that's another way. It's just sort of like, Janice, as Janice, it's like, oh, that's mom, mom is right there. It's like any relationship that you have with another actor, regardless of what it is, whether it's, parent or sibling or lover or whatever the case is. It's like when you're in that moment like that, to have that other person stand in front of you, it makes it very real. It makes, you develop that relationship. And we talked a little bit
Yeah,
last time.
they're coming with their choices, and you know what I mean? Like you're if you're there, I mean, acting is such an interesting thing of like, you got to know all this stuff and you got to know all these lines, but really when it's happening, you got to just let it happen. You can't, and the beautiful thing that's different from theater is you get takes. So, I just worked with my husband on a movie, and he was the director and the writer, and he was in it and I was in it, and it was a
Nice.
magical experience. We just finished recently, but what was cool was it's like once we got the one that he was looking for, then it's like just do, there's a freedom. It's just like just do whatever you need, and TV doesn't always have that freedom because we're covering it from so many angles, or they've switched the camera, so we need to keep it somewhat on the same track because it's, and maybe the scenes don't have that much room to do too much crazy stuff. They're pretty like, how, you know what I mean? There's room for moments to tweak. And I always try and think with that because I'm like, well, we got that one and that one was good and the delivery was fine. And and technically it seemed like focus was good. So it's there. And then the director, also modifies, and the producers being there who understand the whole arc, like someone like Drew, who's in the writer's room, who understands all the places that we may go or not, can kind of help me modify, like, oh, that was like too mean to
Mm.
Addison. So I was always into that. I was like, I want the drama, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and our relationship is definitely in this episode with the break and all this kind of stuff has changed. So, anyways, yeah, it's you kind of have so many, and the way they dress you, it's just really crazy how many people have an effect on how your character comes across. And then you look in the mirror and you're like, okay, great. And a lot of the work is done for you. The
Yeah.
lighting, the music, like you don't need to come. That's why theater is like, well, if you don't have extensive sets, you are having to imbue that space with so much more
Right.
than everything that film and TV can do for you, which is why it's like you bring it down and it's a little more, because also we go into a close up. You can't do that on
Right.
stage.
Right.
You have to be able to include everyone in your realm of communication, whereas on film
Yeah.
you're like, well, the camera's here, it's getting it, I don't need to overshare, you know.
Yeah, I think it's one of the reasons why I do love like small theaters is it gives you the opportunity to, bring things down a little bit because you're not necessarily having to play to, the 30th row or whatever. But one of the things you mentioned, the costume, the way you're dressed, we get to see Janice in a very different costume than what we saw during season one. Talk
Hawaii.
about that. Like, how did that make you feel to, wear the Hawaiian shirt? And yeah, it
Well,
felt a
the thing
little bit. I think people felt a little bit more like, oh yeah, that's Al's daughter. Al's daughter would totally wear that.
Yeah. The thing I found the funniest was when I read Janice has a tan, and I wrote Drew and I was like, well, I'm going to need some help with that because as everyone can see, I am as British as they come. Anyways, yeah, that was, it was fun. I really liked the change. I felt like I think it's a little more like Al, like, cause he used to wear those fun shirts, like
Hmm.
lots of, I mean, it was also like 80s but yeah, I really liked the clothes. I mean, Genevieve is amazing, and there were a lot of great choices. I actually bought a lot of the stuff. That they pulled. I didn't buy not the outfit that I was wearing in the episode, but I try on a lot of things when we go for fittings. It's obviously not just one choice. There's several. And yeah, I remember I was like, oh, I like this and I like that and I like this, and it felt actually kind of closer to my vibe. So yeah, it was really fun. And there's a different vibe when I've never been to Hawaii, but I think the chip on her shoulder has, you know, um melted,
Yeah,
and she's being acknowledged, and there's something, magic calling her to be like, I kind of need your help. I'm like, okay,
of course you do.
I'll come back, I guess.
How much of that do you think has to do with the fact that at the end of the first season, it felt a bit like, with the exception of Ben returning home, it felt a bit like mission accomplished? Um, is that something that you think went into that? And obviously, I know that the writing and what Drew wrote was certainly going to assist with that as well. But for you, do you think that Janice had that feeling that her work had kind of been completed at the end of the first season?
I mean, I guess it wasn't fully completed because we were trying to bring him. I mean, I get it was, we were trying to bring him back, but that
Yeah,
didn't, well, we were trying to avoid Addison and being killed. And, you know, um, it's an interesting question. I think that Janice felt like, they've got their thing going on and they've got their group, and I'm not quite, I'm not one of the team in that regard. Like, I
yeah,
have my own interest in whatever she's, up to or doing. And I think that, like we've talked about, if there was hope, if there's a Sam situation, then
yeah,
yeah, she's gonna be like, I want to come in on that. So just call
right,
me. If you find him or there's some sign of him, like magic, you just have to call me. Right now,
yeah.
I'm going to take a break from this because I did my part for this part, but I think you got this. And I also think that there is, like, she had a goal with it. And I think that, she has other interests and things that she's doing and doesn't need to be, I think it's not easy to be close to it all the time too, in regards to her Al and,
Yeah.
um, yeah. But like I also said, there's also an aspect of, like, you've got a big cast and you've got a lot of storylines to, write and get through, and characters to focus on. And so when you bring something in, it needs to move with everything, Yeah.
So, and I want to obviously talk about the the big moment with the reveal, and Janice letting everyone know why she and Beth are so invested in everything. But I will say that one of the things that has been not a surprise to me, or I think to most people watching the show, but there has been a lot of fan request after the season finale aired that for season 3, hopefully, that with Ben and Addison now leaping together and Addison no longer being able to be the observer, a lot of people want to see Janice as the observer. And I'm just curious what you think about that and what you think about that
What?
response from the fans. Yeah, I mean, it's legitimately a lot of people out there on the internet, Reddit, Facebook, etc. It's like, we want Janice to be the observer.
They want me to be Al?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's really, I mean, I didn't know that. That's really nice. Like, I think that would be very funny, just because, like, three's a crowd,
Right.
Um, I think, in regards to that relationship and creating disagreement, on, like, how to solve a problem or what Ziggy's saying. And I think it'd be cool for her to take her dad's, go in her dad's footsteps and do what he did.
Yeah.
And, it was interesting. I don't know if you saw it. We did a table read. Did you see that table read that we
Yes.
did?
Yes, yeah, for Quantum Leap podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. I was reading Al, and it was funny because I was like, this is written for Dean. So I'm just gonna read it. Like, I'm not here to, like, it's written for, I know who it's written for.
Yeah.
And it was kind of fun for me because I'm not Dean, but I know the feeling of Al, and it was written so well for Al. And so it was fun to actually, it felt right. Like, I'm a very dry person. Like, all of that really actually worked. And I
Yeah.
actually had so much fun. I was like, oh, being the hologram is, like, yeah, with the idea of being Al's daughter. So I mean, look, I think that's really sweet, and I'm glad that the fans have a would enjoy to see that, and that's awesome. And I that would be a very that would be a fun it would be an interesting thing to get to do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, overall, I feel like the response, especially, and it's so strange, and it's a positive strange, but like at the time season one was airing, I think that there were a lot of people that were not a lot, but there was a vocal group of people that were upset that the show wasn't, Quantum Leap 1989, right? And that's fine. You're going to have that anytime you revive, or reboot a property. But I think that one of the things that's been so incredible to see throughout the course of season two is that there's been a lot of perspective shifts. And I think that the fandom as a whole has, they've embraced certain elements of the show wholeheartedly. And one of those elements is Janice. I mean, I think that there is a very strong contingent of fans that think that, Janice is fantastic and they want to see more of you. And, any opportunity to get that is going to be something that, that's going to bring them, to the show. But and it makes a lot of sense because I think that not only as sort of this legacy character that represents this direct tie to the classic series, but I just think with what Janice has brought to the table, it's been incredibly important as well. Because something that was kind of mirrored, whether intentionally or not, and I haven't actually had a chance to ask Drew about this, but in the first season, one of the things that was so intriguing about Janice is that she had a secret, and that becomes true again in Against Time. And I'll never forget, this is when I was a student. We were doing a production of Our Town, and they had hired an equity actor to come in to play the stage manager. And we were doing this actor exercise called Giggle Weeps, where basically what you try to do, you probably are familiar with this, where you try to improv like so basically what it is you improv the happiest moment in your character's life and the saddest moment in your character's life.
Giggle
And
Weeps is
yeah,
called
yeah, Giggle Weeps. um
Giggle Weeps.
yeah. um and so I was playing Doc Gibbs, anyway, that doesn't really have anything to do with the story. But so Robert, who was playing the stage manager, who turned out to become a dear friend of mine and a mentor to me, and we worked together a lot after the fact. But like, he was playing the stage manager, and he hadn't necessarily taken part in a lot of like these exercises because it's like, it's an educational environment. They're students, they need that. I get that. I don't necessarily need that, for me or whatever. But he actually did ask the director. He's like, hey, I want to do this too. And so he and the director Jeff, they go over into a corner and they kind of are whispering or whatever, and we're like, what is going on? And so Robert goes back behind the curtain and then comes out, and he doesn't say a word, and he just stares at all of us, and he kind of walks around the room looking at us, and slowly but surely this like smile starts creeping on his face, and his eyes get kind of bright, and he's kind of nodding, and he kind of like, he's pointing his finger a little bit, and then he just turns around and leaves. And we were all like on the edge of our seat, like, what the hell was that? What was that? And so Jeff like asks him to come back out, and Jeff comes back, or Robert comes back out, and Jeff is like, do you want to tell them what that was? And Robert's just like, well, I have a secret. Like, I know the meaning of life. Like, I know you don't know. And we were just like, oh, and like, and it showed us like how powerful having a secret can be, like what that can do. And I think that again, the fascinating thing is Janice has this secret over the course of this episode. What did it feel like to you to have that moment to reveal to everyone else that they didn't know? You have that line, it's like they don't know, and then tell everyone what had happened, that basically set the foundation for the entire project. Because like, I still firmly believe, without Beth being kind of the keeper of the flame after she and Al stayed together and had this family, that there is potentially things that could have happened along the way that would have, that Quantum Leap as we know it would have never happened. But because
Yeah.
she had all this knowledge, because she knew everything, she kind of kept things in line. And now you get to kind of tell everyone this is how it goes. What did that feel like to you, to have that secret, and then B, to reveal that to everyone?
It's such a beautiful moment in the script. I was really happy that it was there, and it was really nice to, Janice is so witty and, has all these smart things. And a lot of it is like, we're handling the thing that's happening, and it was nice to just have a moment of like, here's the deal for me. Here's why I'm here. And here's why my mom is here still, you know, and supports magic. And it was just really, like you said, like character, you know, this show is about the leap and what's happening, and it's very action packed, and it's always just nice to have a character moment of like just a feeling, like an emotional exchange of like, you know, this is why I'm here. And it was cool because, like I said, that's my favorite scene that I watched of them, when you know, when Al asks Sam to do that for him, and when Beth turns in the scene and sees like the emotion on Susan's face, the beautiful performance of that. Those are the moments I live for as an actor. Like it's when you see the emotion in another character that you've experienced yourself
Yeah.
about somebody else, and it makes you feel like, it's just I think art, it just reminds people they're alive, you know. It's because it's crazy, you're watching someone in a fake world, in a fake costume, look a certain way when they see someone walk through a door, and you're crying. Like, come on, like that's empathy, that's understanding, it's really being there with another person and experiencing what they're experiencing with them. And then from there, that's how you can then help someone or understand them. I mean, that's a whole other thing, we've talked about that before, but that's, in that moment of sharing that with the team, that's one of those moments of like me and my mom. And then when the butterfly effect thing happens, it's actually kind of scary and emotional. You don't really see Janice rattled, that's not her, you know, but she's
Yeah.
a person. And in that moment, it's like we could just all, I don't know what's going to happen right now. This could
Right.
all be it. It could be over, you know? And so I love that. That's what I live. Those are the gems, that those moments that you live for as an actor, I think.
Yeah.
And they don't have to be throughout a whole scene. It's just, even if you have one, it's just like, ooh, that's like, there's that person. Do you want to come up? My cat is
We're a cat friendly
asking for.
podcast.
I also love my cat.
What's your cat's name?
So yeah, Louis, he's 17. He's like 102.
Oh my goodness.
And it's a lot.
You know what I
You know,
realized as I asked your cat's name, that I think you actually posted something on Instagram just yesterday, and the question was, "What's your cat's name?"
it was, and I haven't done that Q, and I wrote a Q. I did like a Q&A thing, and then I've got to go back on and do it. Anyways, I hope I answered your question. Yes, it was a beautiful moment to explain it. And for the new fans who don't know that,
Right.
like, you know, um, a lot of the original fans do. And I love being a character that gets to give the original fan base the things that they know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think it's a really fun place to be and bridge the two worlds. So maybe I should wear crazy shirts and smoke cigars.
If you want. I don't know. They probably wouldn't allow you to smoke cigars on TV anymore. I don't know. It's well, you know, one of the things that I think has been so appreciated about the second season, rightfully so, is that it has been a very character-driven narrative from the beginning. That it hasn't had that, you know, the meta plot that the first season really sort of lived by. And
Mhm.
because everyone really got these character moments, I thought it was fantastic to be able to see Janice have that as well throughout the course of this episode. Something else that Janice gets to do, which is so cool, is, you know, you've got your own imaging chamber, which was left over from season 1. You've got the hand link, and you get to hand that off to Addison to take back so that she can use that to talk to Ben. You know, I always think that props can be incredibly important and powerful, and sometimes, you know, you walk into a room, you don't notice it, it doesn't mean anything, and that's fine, because that's real life too. But then there are those things that you can just like hold in your hand, and it just gives you this feeling. And talking about being sort of that connective tissue between the classic series and the revival, um what's it feel like having that hand link? And does it do something for you as an actor, or is it just, at the end of the day, it's just a piece of, you know, plastic and wires and lights and whatever?
No, I feel you know, when I hold the hand link, when I'm given the hand link, I always, there's a history in it, you know. It's like passing on a torch, and like I know the significance of it for everybody and the meaning of it, you know, to see it on screen. And
Mm-hmm.
so I feel that too, and it's fun. You're like, "Ooh, the hand link's coming," you know. And like I said, I love sets. I love the details, you know, depending on what kind of set it is and what's there. And like, oh my gosh. And like, I remember when I was in Beth's house when I did my first scene on the series in season 1, where I guess that wasn't my first scene, but it was my first scene because the other ones you can't tell who I am really. With Beth, with Susan in her house when I poisoned her tea.
Yeah.
But with all the photos on the piano, like I got this video. It's on I have like a little highlight reel for Quantum Leap where I save things. But
Nice.
there was all the photos on the piano and the picture of Dean, and like it's those things are so cool. Like it's
Yeah.
just we get to play make believe. So yeah, the hand link is just fun because I know how exciting it is for the fans too. It's like
Yeah.
you know. So I get that excitement through it. And that line is very funny. That's a cute moment where I'm just like, you know, this is a family heirloom. Like, be
Yeah.
careful with it. You know,
Right,
like
right, right.
a fun moment.
Which is also funny because I know that Drew had mentioned a couple of times that that was generally the vibe on set was always like don't break the hand link, like not just that hand link but also even like the puck that Addison usually carries. So
Mm-hmm.
it is kind of funny, like, you know, the sort of the meta reference there of like don't break this.
No,
um
props is where's the hand link? Where'd you put the hand link? I'm like, it's right there. The box. I'm like, oh, okay. You know, because actors walk around sometimes and they forget they have their props on them, and I understand why props. Like I'm
oh
very like the prop, I give it back to you. Like or rings. Like I have my dad's. I wear Al's ring,
yeah,
his naval ring.
yeah, I think so, like his, yeah.
And so, you know, these are things like you don't get those in costumes, right? That's a props thing. So costumes gives you your main clothes and your earrings, but anything that's significant, like a watch, a bag, a ring, it's a different department. And
Mm,
they give it to you and you give it back before you exit that set and go
yeah.
back. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Sometimes tracking stuff like that is always it can be a challenge. I know that there have been times when, you know, I've been like walking out of a theater and just been like, oh no, this isn't mine,
yeah,
and had to like run back in and, you know, put it back. But
yeah.
um,
We don't have another one of those. So you need to give us, there's no copies.
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Speaking of other props that I think some people might not have caught it, and I know I've mentioned it on the show before, so any, you know, listeners to Fate's Wide Wheel already know this. But were you aware that the toy car that Jen takes with her is a sort of a scale replica of of Al's car from the episode of Leap for Lisa in the classic series?
No, I
Yeah,
would have been, I did not know that.
yeah.
That's wild. So cool.
Yeah, it's well, it's funny because Drew Drew had sent me a message and he was just sort of like, he's like, keep your eye out for the car, and I was like, the car, what is he up to? Like, I gotta know what this is going to be, and so when, you know, when I saw it, it was just sort of like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's the car. Yeah, I just thought that was so funny, and it's so interesting to me that there's like that Al or Janice or, you know, whoever had this toy car that was
Mhm.
basically a replica of the car that he had when, you know, he was going to the Naval Academy. Um,
That's so
but
cool. I did not know that little gem. That's fun.
yeah,
Little Easter egg.
and I love the fact that there was that there felt like there was so much of that throughout the course of this season that it didn't have to be, you know, anything overt. It didn't have to be, you know, like obviously the scene with Janice is very much overt, and I think that that's the thing that makes it feel so so earned, because it, you know, we don't feel like we're getting fan service in every single episode, you know, that it's not just about saying like, oh, we're Quantum Leap. It's instead like we're telling a story, and it's a story about these people. And then when you do get to a moment where you can, you know, tell that story, it feels a little bit more earned because you haven't necessarily been doing it the whole time.
Yeah.
um so I wanted to ask you, and it's funny you mentioned it earlier, but this is something that again Drew had been like, oh, you should ask her about this. But you mentioned that you just finished a film with your husband. Can you tell us more about that? Because obviously, like, I love talking Quantum Leap, but I love talking. Yeah, yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
Um, yeah, yes, so my husband's an actor, but he's also a filmmaker, and he made his first feature back in, gosh, when did he shoot that? End of 2019, I want to say. And Making movies is a hard business. I mean, getting any art made is hard, but films especially are tough. So it was very exciting. He came up with this concept. It was very cool to be a part of something from the beginning. So I had heard, obviously, this, Mark like woke up one morning. He was like, I have an idea for a script. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And he was like, what if, there was a mother and then there's the children and they have to go home because they can't, does she have dementia or is she possessed?
Mm.
And it's just this, and I'm not going to get into any more because it's set against the backdrop of horror, but it's got it's not just like a horror, like to scare, like there's a lot of thought behind it and that conversation, caring for parents and parents caring for children and that crossover in life and that kind of thing. So, but it was awesome. We were in Hamilton, Canada. So we went up and we went to work every day. And I've worked with Mark as an actor before, and that's wonderful. And we've been very lucky. We've worked together quite a lot as couples. So it's been great. This one we were playing siblings, which I know sounds weird, but I feel like it's so interesting how when you're in character, you just don't know, like, I don't think people will really, we're just not who we are. So it's fine. But it's a wonderful experience, and he's a really great director. Being an actor, he understands film. I mean, Mark watches 45 minutes of a movie every single morning.
Wow.
No fail.
Nice.
And has been making movies with his buddies he used to do when he was like 15 years old. He understands all departments. He just really gets it, and he's so good with actors, being an actor himself and understanding, you can't let an actor just keep doing takes and not acknowledge that they did anything. You know what I mean? Because then you're like, is it going well? Like, I don't know. Like, you do the take and he would be like, that was great. We're going to do this. And you just felt in really good hands. And I sound biased. I'm married to him, but actually some people are like, how is that going to be? He's direct. He's telling me what to do every day. It's a big, it was a good reverse situation. I was like, I think we needed me just being told what to do. It was a joy. It was one of my favorite artistic experiences. And, we had a beautiful cast. We shot it in 15 days. It was lightning speed.
Wow, yeah.
And it was a big ensemble. And, Sheila McCarthy is from Women Talking, a wonderful actress, and is the mother, the lead. And it was just a great time with really good people. I feel like artistic experiences are so precious. And I think when you're with everybody who really appreciates that preciousness and is there to just do the job and enjoy it, it makes it just so much better. And that's really what it was. So it's in post right now. He's editing from Budapest. He's in Budapest right now on another job, but he's editing from the hotel room.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Long distance.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, wow. That's so cool though. I love that. And now clearly I have to try to get him to come on the show sometime and talk about all that. What it's like to boss you around.
Yeah, he's a very knowledgeable, he's really made me a better artist. Like everyone's an artist for different reasons, and I love it. And his understanding of film, like we don't stream anything. So nothing is streamed. It's a TV series or a one-off movie that you can't get, but Mark buys Blu-rays.
Yeah.
And we have Blu-ray players, and you have to watch it in the aspect ratio that the director intended, and there's appreciation for all the work that went into it. And so when he's watching a movie, when he finishes that movie, then when he works out, he watches all the special features.
Yes.
His knowledge of performances and understanding. So he has such a fast shorthand, and yeah, it was cool. And my character is very different than me. It was a very silent character who observes a lot in the scenes. And, Emily Blunt in Sicario, how her performance is, she's observing what these guys are doing, and she's very contained and not like she hasn't got the confidence or the knowledge to say something. Like
Yeah.
it comes out slowly until the end, right? Where it's just like her integrity is, it's just like, that's enough.
Right.
And that was a performance I watched that was inspiring. But yeah, it was just I mean, to get to do what you love and get to do it together. And our daughter was with my parents live up in Canada, so she was with them having a blast in the snow, and it was a wonderful, very grateful for the experience. And hopefully the movie, I mean, it's in post right now, and then, a good festival run
Yeah.
and, release, and, you know, yeah, but it was great.
That's so cool. I mean, first of all, I have to say that I love films like that because I certainly went through a period in my youth where like a good slasher flick was fine or whatever. But I certainly, as I've gotten older, even though they can be incredibly unsettling, I definitely appreciate like things that are a little bit more atmospheric with their horror, or a little bit more psychological with their horror, as opposed to being just, let's carve people up for lack of better words or whatever.
It's
Um,
definitely, he's more, it's a thoughtful, horror is it's such a range genre. Like it's
right.
not, there's what you're talking about, and then there's the comedy aspect of it. And then there's just, things that are nothing even necessarily happens, but you just feel frightened or scared, or there's so many degrees. And I think that this definitely has some elements in it that are obviously scary, but marks there's a message there. The
Yeah.
purpose of the movie isn't just to like do that. There's a message to be shared through that world,
Yeah, yeah, that's super cool. Well, I mean, I will definitely keep my eyes out for it, and I can't wait to hear more about it and to see it eventually. And
Yeah.
like I said, I would love to talk more about it. I actually was just informed a second ago that I have to go pick up my daughter.
Oh my
So yeah,
God.
everything's
You
okay.
should-
It's all good. Um, I know. Well, but I would love to do this again. One of the things that I've been saying to everyone that's come on the show over the past few weeks is that I feel so fortunate to not only have the chance to talk with you, but also that now I'm a fan and I want to see what you do next, whatever it is, whether it be Quantum Leap or not. And I hope that we get to continue the opportunity every once in a while to have these conversations because they've been such a joy. And I'm so grateful to you for last time, because last time was obviously a very emotional time, not just for me, but for the people that knew Matt, and I miss him dearly. I think about him every day, and obviously every time I do this, he's in my mind, he's in my heart. But what you did, I mean this sincerely, what you did for me and for people in this community, but when you came on the show last time, it felt so um healing in a way to be able to have that moment and to talk and to be able to talk about him as well. And the Quantum Leap podcast asked, if it was okay to use a clip from that, and of course I said yes. And I ended up actually being on their tribute show that they did for Matt, and they used a clip of you speaking about Matt and art and doing this and why we do this. And so I just want to say sincerely thank you, because it meant a lot, not just to me. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, that's so, I mean, yeah, that makes me, yeah, I'm just really glad that we did it, because like we talked about, it was just that was for him, and that's what he would want. And
Yeah.
I'm really glad that we did it. And I'm glad that I could have helped in that way. That's really, thank you. Thank you for saying that. And I'm glad I could help.
Yeah, and you were one of the first people that I got to ask the question of what inspires you to, and that has continued to be something that I ask people since then, and it has yielded just some incredible responses. And so I'm grateful. I'm just grateful. I'm grateful for you, and it's been so cool to be able to chat with you, and I can't thank you enough for coming on again and talking about everything, art, theater,
I know we talk
Quantum
about it
Leap.
all.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just Quantum Leap.
Yeah, I could talk about, I mean, life is just an interesting thing, and we get
Yeah.
to do it, and I'm very grateful for that. And, yeah, we'll have future chats about future things, but you should go pick up your kid.
I should. I definitely should. Georgina Riley, thank you so so much. I can't wait to do this again. We'll put a to be continued on it, and
Yes.
and
Thank you.
hopefully, yeah,
Louisa.
absolutely. Bye, Louie.
Oh, my little old man. Okay, bye.
All right. Thank you so much, fellow travelers. Take care of yourselves. Take care of one another. Stay safe out there. And remember to always, always leap responsibly.